Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us for our Maths Anxiety in Adults webinar. We are absolutely thrilled to be joined by the amazing Amanda Keane, who's a dyscalculia specialist assessor, very experienced teacher, and has a particular interest in dyscalculia in adults and maths anxiety in adults, and is amazing at coming up with ideas on things that might help. So over to you, Amanda, and thank you very much.
My pleasure. That's yeah, a bit of pressure on my shoulders there, Kat. Thanks. Yes, so I'm Amanda, and actually, when I was at school, and quite a long way into my teaching career as well, I had maths anxiety myself. And even now, having been a maths teacher for a few years and worked with dyscalculia and tutoring and so on, even now, if you put me in with people that I think, oh gosh, yes, they have a great in-depth understanding of maths, I still feel that anxiety. So I completely understand what sort of everybody's going through. And in fact, today I've sort of been a bit brave myself. So if I just go through and start off. I will oh, I hope this is going to work. Oh, I have to go down there, do I? Yeah, so I'm going to obviously show you what we're going to do in a moment. But I've actually started off with a little bit of courage, putting in one of these Menti polls. And it was really to ask you whether you yourself have anxiety about maths. And I would imagine probably quite a few of you do. And I'm very sorry to get you to have to pick up your phones and everything now. But what we've got on the screen, there's a QR code that you can put into your sort of phone camera, and it should bring up a link and it should take you straight to this question. Do you have anxiety about maths? And I'm hoping that I don't know whether this will work because I've never used it before, but hopefully as you start to answer, it will start to show on this sort of Mentimeter. And if it doesn't matter. We'll just move on, and I will just assume that probably quite a few of you do have maths anxiety. But yeah, if you can have a go at that now, you might join using the menti.com website link, and then you can see the number right at the top. And I've tried to make that number really clear so that it's easy to type in, I hope, even with dyscalculia. And I'm going to have a go at this myself because we haven't got a lot of answers, so I'm assuming it might not be working very well. So let's have a go. Kat, I don't know whether you've had any luck. You see, this is the trouble with trying new technology, isn't it? Did you have any luck, Kat? We're trying to do a little vote on here. Oh, she's having a go now. And as I say, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. It'll all be fine. Okay, so I think possibly at the moment it doesn't seem to be going through, in which case we will probably skip this screen because you don't really want to be looking at an empty screen for the whole time. But the idea was to just get a little bit of interaction into what we're going to be talking about. But let's move on. I'm sure most of you, oh, there we go. I've got something. So yeah, for 8 of you, yes. That's including me actually as well. For one of you, no. But what I'm
That would
hoping
be
is,
me. Sorry, guys.
oh, that is fine, Kat. No, you can always share and be happy that you're accepted here.
Lots
So,
of other anxiety, but not around maths.
no, well, that's great. And you know what? That really helps because that's what we're going to look at today is the fact that it just seems to sort of have so much impact for so many people. And in fact, as part of the Dyscalculia Network, Kat very kindly found me some volunteers to talk about what it is that that helps people to perhaps cope with their maths anxiety, what sort of things they find really useful. And I've kind of based this on something that Amelia said in as part of this conversation, as part of my focus group. And she was saying, do you know what? She has a plan. She knows what she needs to do if something goes wrong. So maybe she's standing at the till, looking at the receipt, something doesn't feel right about it. And she'll think to herself, okay, I'm going to go back home. I'm going to look at it when I can relax. And I'm going to try to work it out, perhaps even ask a friend. So I thought, So I wasn't really sure. I felt that this was a really good place to start a conversation, actually. And I'm so pleased that there's a chance afterwards to be able to all chat to each other in a sort of a more relaxed setting without, a presentation going on. And what I want to perhaps give to you is just some ideas that might hopefully prove helpful, things that you might be able to try when you're feeling particularly anxious about doing some maths, whether that's at work or at home. And it might be that some of these things aren't particularly useful for you, but maybe they spark off some other ideas. And that's the idea. That's kind of where I've started with this. And I'm hoping later on that we can all share some strategies that we use to help ourselves to keep calm. And for Kat, it might be in other situations. For the rest of us, it might be with the maths. And that way, it's another way of sharing our ideas, because in the end, that's where we're going to find the help that we need, I think, is to listen to each other and think about what works for everybody else. So what I'm going to start off with, I'm hoping this works. Click over up at the top left there. Let's get some information, first of all. If we're going to create our own toolbox, we need to understand maths anxiety and why it's having the impact that it does. Okay, so this is a definition that's kind of quite a popular one, really. Quite a lot of people talk about. So maths anxiety really is to do with unpleasant emotions and thoughts. And actually, for the students, the younger students I work with as a dyscalculia assessor, I often find actually that it might end up being maths anxiety rather than dyscalculia when I assess. And it doesn't necessarily have to be anxiety, or if it is, actually the student doesn't always recognize it. And we may actually more recognize the physical symptoms, the stomach ache, perhaps the butterflies, sweaty palms, very weird. But anyway, it's those sorts of physical feelings that you might get used to. But actually, it doesn't just have to be an anxiety. I've had children, when I've worked with them, be very angry about what's happening. And I know when I've talked to a police officer that I worked with and assessed, he was saying how frustrated he feels with himself whenever he can't do something. Because every time he feels like, come on, I should have learnt this from last time. Well, no, actually, we're going to see in a moment that maths anxiety can really impact your ability to remember the maths that you know, let alone be able to do new maths. Okay, so that's a bit of an idea about what it is, and we'll have a think about as we go through how it impacts you. But what I wanted to look at first of all was something that Inez, who is another part of our little focus group, part of the Dyscalculia Network, something that she wrote about her feelings of anxiety or feelings of anxiety at school. And I just wanted to share this because I just thought, first of all, I think it's so important to share how we all feel. But also, I think you'll really recognize this for some of you. And although this relates to school, we all understand, particularly when I get to the ending of it, the sort of the sentiment involved. So it starts off with she's in the stall, her knees up to her face, tears streaming, silently screaming. He punches the wall, hoping to hear his bones go crack. She wipes her eyes and washes her face. No one can know. He pulls at his shoulder-length hair, clumps in his hand. The pressure is too high, too much, too loud. You need to put more effort into your appearance. Have you only really written 1,000 words? Next Monday, there's an exam. We wish our lives away, wish to close our eyes and for it all to be over. And it was that last line that I really felt when I was listening to that. And I've had anxiety sort of throughout my life, so I really understand all the emotions involved. But that bit, you kind of, oh gosh, all right, it'll be over soon. Oh, right, no, that'll be done soon. This meeting will be done soon at work. I won't have to think about this again. And we do end up kind of a little bit of wishing our lives away. And I know a big part of anxiety is really wanting it to stop and to be over and to feel better again. And I know as part of the journey that I've had through anxiety and depression, that actually sometimes sitting with that feeling and just allowing ourselves to really understand, yep, okay, I'm feeling this fear, because actually the more and the longer you sit with something, okay, I literally can almost feel my shoulders go down as I do so. And it starts lessening. Doesn't mean it goes away, but it does start lessening a bit. And although that isn't something that I would necessarily recommend, I'm just having a think about the ways I know I've learned to deal with my anxiety. And for me, accepting it has been really important, and building this toolkit, knowing what I need to do when I feel like that. So let's have a look at a little bit of information about maths anxiety. You may well have seen this already, but this was Dyscalculia Network with the Maths Anxiety Trust. And I've just picked out a few of these really relating to adults. And first of all, although this one says we're looking at 15 to 24-year-olds, it's over a third, over 1 out of every 3 people that adults that struggle with maths anxiety. And that isn't just for that age group, actually. That pretty much goes throughout adulthood and throughout all the different ages. So that's 1 out of every 3 people. And although that's really sad, and I feel that as being quite sad, actually, especially now that I've sort of learned to like maths, because I've kind of like learned to really enjoy it and the patterns involved and everything. But actually, it also means that there's lots of people that feel the same way. And although I know if you have dyscalculia, it's really hard when you say to someone, I'm dyscalculic, and they say, oh, yes, me too, I hate maths. It's not quite the same thing. But when you talk about maths anxiety, a lot of people do understand how you feel. And I do think there's a real strength in having those people that understand you. Okay, down at the bottom, I thought this was interesting, and it worries me as a teacher, obviously. And that's the fact that only about 1 in 4, a quarter of undergraduate students, feel that they have the numerical skills and the understanding for daily life. Now, I know that doesn't necessarily straight away shout anxiety to you, but that really interests me because they may well have the skills for daily life, but they may well not feel like it. And that's where the anxiety comes in, isn't it? And actually, for when you've got maths anxiety, it's almost like it will lock away the information that you do have and that you do know about maths and numbers. So it does make things ever so tricky. And then if we move on to this, and I will talk a little bit about parents sort of later on in the presentation, but 1 in 5 parents suffer from something called arithmophobia. So a real fear of numbers, something that obviously is going to be really difficult when it comes to helping your children, obviously through school, but also in dealing with all those different things to do with number that you have to as the baby's born and you're looking at its growth rate and so on through that first year. There's an awful lot of things. Oh gosh, measuring out formula, all those things. And actually, if you're really scared of numbers and you have that real fear, that's going to be really difficult. And 1 in 5 parents do feel that. So again, I think that's what I love about the Dyscalculia Network. It isn't just about giving us the information, it's providing us with a community of people that we can talk to. And I just think that is so crucial. And finally, for this page, women are more than twice as anxious as men about using maths and numbers. And I feel, although I sort of have literally no evidence for this, but I do wonder whether it's to do with, as a society, for many years as I was growing up, because I'm obviously quite a lot older than most of you, for many years, it's maths was thought of as, well, that's for boys, isn't it? Maths and science, that's what boys are going to find easier, and girls will find other things easier, like language, for example. I don't know, but I just feel like there's something come through from that. And of course, I think women are more likely to suffer from anxiety, but that is not to say, gentlemen, that we forget you as well, because all of us are in this together, really. Okay, so I feel like this is probably the truest statement ever. And this is from Dr. Tom Hunt. And I will be mentioning his research facility that he sort of runs with several other psychologists. And they produce so much information about maths anxiety, so much research. And he said here that maths anxiety can mask your true ability. And I think we're all very quick, aren't we, to say, no, no, I can't do maths. No, sorry, I found it really hard at school. That's it, I can't do it. And I know that's how we feel. But I do think that's also partly our anxiety speaking. Let's keep us safe. We don't want to take part in any maths so that we can't fail. But actually, you have the ability in there. You have, to some extent, to whatever extent, you've got some ability to deal with numbers. And I know for some of you, you've got dyscalculia as well. And so, of course, I'm sort of talking to a wider group here. But whatever knowledge you have, the maths anxiety is going to lock that into a box and turn the key. And it's going to be very difficult to draw down on that information. And it's because it puts our body into fight, flight, or freeze mode. That's what anxiety does. As I say to my students, it's like your brain is trying to protect you from the bear that's just about to come out of the cave and eat you, because that's basically what your brain thinks. So, of course, it doesn't really want to worry about solving problems. It wants to run. So that's basically what it's trying to do. And what is maths all about? It's about problem solving. So it shuts away those very skills that we need to use in maths. And we're pretty much stuck in the lesson because there isn't really a bear. So we can't run out of the classroom. And we same in meetings at work as well. I'm sure for some of you, you must feel the way that you did when you were back in the classroom. And that is so hard to deal with. So that's one of the things I think is really important to know. So the information and your knowledge is still there. It just isn't accessible while you're in that state of anxiety. So, how does it actually impact performance? Well, anxiety impacts your working memory, okay, and your, which is great, your numerical processing. So, basically, working memory is where if I was going to give you a mental arithmetic question, 3 add 4, that's where you'd hold the numbers while you count them on in your head or while you work out the answer. And numerical processing is pretty much being able to look at numbers and understand what they mean, which is a problem in itself in dyscalculia. Then you've got the anxiety piled on top of that, and it makes it exceptionally difficult. But there are some of us out here without dyscalculia, but will still almost have that difficulty, that same difficulty understanding numbers, because that's what the anxiety is doing. And how does it actually impact the memory? Well, one of the easiest ways to understand it is because actually, as soon as you become anxious about whatever it is, right, me being anxious about that poll that I just did, well, that's all you can think about. So you're distracted by those negative thoughts. And actually, it's really hard to pay attention at those times. And that part of your brain is almost also trying to control your upset, your emotion, trying to help you to regulate that. But that means it's all of that part of your brain is really focusing on how you're feeling, which of course means that when you're in that meeting and you're trying to look through the data or what have you, the information you've got, that's really hard to then process all of that. And we'll talk about how we can maybe help that in a little bit. The best way I kind of thought to talk about this was I know that whenever I'm somewhere on a training day, in an inset meeting, in a general meeting, perhaps with people from another branch of the firm, often you have to go around the room and you have to introduce yourselves. And I think universally, most people don't like this particular activity. And I certainly don't, because I spend the entire time trying to decide what to say. And then I think I've got it down. And then somebody will make some little jokey comment. And I'm thinking, well, maybe I should be funny. Oh my God, right. What do I need to do? And so the whole time, that they're going around the circle and introducing everybody. I haven't listened to any of those people. So it's as soon as I've done my bit, fine, I can relax. Oh, isn't it lovely to meet these other people? But I couldn't do it while I was waiting to have my go. And I think that's my best way of explaining to people what maths anxiety is like if you don't have it. Because of course there'll be a lot of people that just go, oh, I don't know what the problem is. But actually, if you can explain if you can make people put people in a situation they would understand more, hopefully they'd be able to understand those feelings and be able to perhaps sympathize or empathize a bit more with you. Okay, so we've also then, because we're so preoccupied with those feelings, we actually can't process the information as quickly as normal. So, for example, I don't know if there's some weekly forecasts being given in a meeting, say, for example, that might be much harder to process that information than if you were sitting next to your colleague and they were just talking to you, chatting to you about it on a one-to-one. So it just slows down everything that you're able to take on board. Your working memory, the one that I talked about earlier, it's kind of having to be split between controlling the emotion and trying to do whatever the number work is. So it just doesn't have the capacity to do everything all at the same time. And in the end, your brain is going to look after you and regulate your emotions. And I have learned after many years of depression and anxiety that I have learned to actually appreciate my brain, because I do know it's trying its best and it's trying to look after me. It's just that it's not always doing it in the best way. But I've tried to kind of work with it rather than be against it quite as much as I used to be. And another problem that we then run up to is the avoidance. And I'm sure, and there are always going to be things that actually we're going to ask somebody else to help us with, or that, yeah, you're not perhaps going to do that part of the work, but you'll do this part of the work. But the trouble with avoidance is that if we never meet numbers or do anything with them, then you almost like the fear grows, doesn't it? Because maybe if you do have to do something with them, that's when it's going to go horribly wrong. And if we don't give ourselves a chance to disprove that, and in the most gentle way possible, where you just do something very small, very unpressured to do with numbers, if you're able to do that and that goes successfully, well, that's one little bit of evidence you have that it might not always be the best course of action to try to avoid things. And at no stage am I ever saying, right, off you go and do this. But I just wanted to flag that up because I think that's another thing that is worth thinking about. And we'll talk about it a little bit later on, actually. Okay, final bit of information I wanted to share with you here. And that is something I share everywhere, so you may have seen this already. But when they have measured the brain signals from people with maths anxiety and people in physical pain, I hope not too much physical pain. I think they just got pricked on the finger with a needle or something. The brain activation is really similar. So your brain is acting to protect you. And whilst that might not make a difference in the moment, I hope it kind of helps you to understand why these feelings occur, because I do believe that understanding is a really important step in order to be able to manage things in the best way. So let's go back to our toolbox. We've got some information there. By no means all the information I will hasten to add. So obviously we will talk about other places to go as well, because this is going to be, as I say, more like an introduction, I suppose. Let's have a look at actually managing the stress response. Now, this is where I'd really like some of your responses as well, if that's okay. We're going to have one more Mentimeter thing, and it's going to produce a word cloud. That's the idea, everyone. Who knows whether it will work? So let's click on it and have a look. Whoop, there we go. And the reason I wanted to put this in was because when we were talking as part of the focus group, again, this was some of the things that we talked about. So I think, Mia, if I remember rightly, you were saying about that, you know that if this thing happens, that you are going to go and talk to this person about it. You've got your plan. Some of you said that deep breathing really helps, the sort of relaxation things we found out about a lot more recently with mindfulness and so on. And some of you may have other things. You may have a friend you ask for help with. You may have a particular app or resource that you find really useful when you've got those feelings of anxiety about maths. And when I'm asking you for what helps you when you feel anxious, it could be something literally to help you do the maths, or it could be something that you think about when you're just trying to relax yourself and hopefully make yourself feel a little bit calmer. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to, as you can see, oh my God, it's actually working. Amazing. Okay, right, time. That's fantastic. And I'm very pleased because that's coming up later, actually. But a quiet space, yes, that's really important, isn't it? I get so frustrated when I'm anxious and then everything's noisy, like trying to put in this Mentimeter into my presentation whilst also looking after my grandson this afternoon. Probably not my best thought. Yeah. So there's a couple of things on there already. If anybody else is able to offer any more ideas, that would be super. I'm going to put one in as well. And this is what, for me, I find particularly useful. Oh, I need to get onto the Mentimeter, don't I? So you should be able to scan the QR code and hopefully go straight onto it. But up at the top of the screen, we've also got, you can go to menti.com, and then there's the world's longest number to type in to get onto here. But I hope I've broken it up as clearly as I can to make it a little bit easier. And you can add maybe 2 or 3 words on here if you want. So I do. Yeah, well, you'll find out what I do in a moment because hopefully it will appear. And then, okay, I'm going to put this on. It might not make any sense when I type it in. So let's submit that. And I click on here just to see if it's any. Amazing. This thing is magic. That's fantastic. Yeah, the breathing came up. Oh, drawing it. Now, you see, that's something because I'm not a creative person, I would never have thought of. So that's fantastic because that's something I'm going to add in for next time as well. And friends, yes, pencil. I like it. Weirdly, I think better with a pencil in my hand. I think it's from years of teaching and helping children. But genuinely, if I need to think, if I hold a pencil, it helps. I don't know, maybe I'm just a bit weird. So I think we've got loads of ideas there. And what's really nice, Kat, what I'll probably do is send you this copy of it, yeah, so that we can have those in there. Some of them I've mentioned, some of them I haven't, but thank you so much, everybody. And I'm so proud that I put Mentimeter in and it's worked. Amazing. I'm never doing it again. Okay, so talking to friends and colleagues, I mean, honestly, I personally feel like this is such an important thing to do. And it's not something that everybody feels happy to. Completely understand that. But I think if you can open up to, and I think colleagues is harder, I know, but often there is that one person that you feel like, do you know what, I do definitely feel like I can talk to this person. And I do think that's helpful because for me, I'm a sharer, that's what I do, and that's fine. And I do it because it's really important to me that people understand me, but also so that I feel like I'm opening up other people's eyes to what else is out there, in terms of how people feel and so on. So you might have a colleague that you can speak to, but it might be your friend. It might be, the person that you always go to when you need to work something out, or when you need to talk to somebody about how it is you're feeling, or that problem at work, maybe, or that problem with your bills or your tax bill that you need to be able to think about. Because actually, like we've just seen from that word cloud, there's always something that somebody else comes up with that you haven't thought about. So talking to friends and colleagues, I'm a firm believer, and family, of course, as well. I can't quite believe I missed that off there. Sorry, families. But yeah, being open with people and talking about how you feel. And a couple of people put this actually on the word cloud, and that's about taking the pressure off. And I guess in a way, this is kind of similar. So we've got, I put down things to do with money because I find that that's often quite an important thing. So many things, whether we're planning or shopping or buying or paying our taxes, is to do with numbers and maths. So perhaps it's about finding somebody that can help you. Perhaps it's actually about, and I tell you what, massive fan of Google. Perhaps it's also sometimes about Googling for a template, for example, for recording your expenses. You know, people have run up Excel templates, and actually, if you can use one of those, they've already put all those calculations in there for you. So that could be something that is really helpful. I appreciate it might not be very useful if you don't like computers. But, it's all about finding those ways. Money and cash is a really difficult one. And having talked to people, sometimes people will ask the cashier for help. Sometimes people will actually go and they will work out their money themselves in a corner of a shop and then go to the till, just to give themselves some time to work it out, really. And sometimes people might, have a strict budget that they go to the supermarket with, and they need to know that it's, they can't spend any more than that, because otherwise they might go a little bit mad and then not really taking any notice of the budget. Those sort of self-scan things at supermarkets can be really helpful. I suspect they would perhaps be a bit too overwhelming at times, but there are, thank goodness, things to do with technology that can help us. But again, it's thinking about how you want to run these things. And we've got the tax revenues there. And actually, I have to say, HMRC are really good at providing courses for people, because I've become self-employed. They actually run free courses for people so that you can learn how to do the various things. Now, I will tell you now, petrified when I started that. This was many years ago when I became self-employed. Really quite nervous about going in, but actually, do you know what? All of the people on that course were in exactly the same position as me, because if they had been, oh yeah, I can do all of this, this is really easy, well, they wouldn't have been there. So that really helped, and they were really understanding, and they didn't rush you through anything, and they're the sort of people, it's amazing, actually. We always sort of vilify, don't we? Sort of, oh, I don't want to talk to HMRC. Actually, they've been really helpful. And that's another thing. So one of the people in the focus group also mentioned there was a really complicated payment scheme for a subscription they wanted to take up. Now, they really couldn't make head nor tail of it, and actually I'm not sure I could have done either. But actually, by going to the company themselves and emailing their helpline or contact page, and actually they were able to then come back to them and explain it much more clearly. And possibly you can talk over the phone to do that. But again, I guess that's part of my belief in talking to people and asking for things. And I think partly that's my age. I do think you get into your 50s and you're like, no, actually, this isn't the way it should be. There is help out there. It's just that a lot of us don't feel like we should ask. And I'm a big believer in asking. So taking the pressure off, giving yourself some time to do things. And actually, that might be, I can't work out this receipt right now. I'm going to pay the money. I'm going to go back to my house and I'm going to sit down, have a cup of tea. I'm going to relax, maybe get a friend over, and then we're going to look at it. Because that way, if you're in that sort of rest and digest, the opposite of fight and flight, rest and digest, if you're in that sort of mode, then that anxiety isn't likely to have such an impact on your ability to work through those numbers. So I think that's really important. And I think it's really hard because we're all rushing everywhere and with everything, particularly at work, for example. But that's, I guess, another thing, and I think I'm going to say this later, but I will say it now. But another thing you could do if it comes to meetings and so on for work is actually ask for documents to be given to you earlier, so that you can prepare for the meeting. Now, that's something quite routinely we would suggest to adults with dyslexia to do. Now, quite a lot of that paperwork is going to have numbers in it. And rather than dread the meeting and already go into it in a fight or flight mode, actually to perhaps have had a look at the documentation if you're able to beforehand. That would be great. And I was even thinking, sometimes we discuss, oh, I don't know, I'm not a business person. They'll discuss something to do with the amount of money they've made. Let's have a look at how much money we've made in this quarter, which would involve some sort of calculation. Well, it might be that you might sort of come to realize that that seems to come up every, quarterly meeting. Or it might be that you can actually ask them, look, is there anything you'd like us to do with these numbers that would be really useful within the meeting? Because it's perhaps something that you can do beforehand. So that was just my idea. And I think that's, again, it's just about the sort of giving yourself time to think about it. Now, I've always feel slightly guilty, weirdly, when I sort of share these sorts of things, because I always feel like, oh, I don't know, it's everywhere, isn't it? Mindfulness now, and you hear a lot about it. But I really, really do believe that there's ways in which we can use some of these strategies that would actually be impactful and effective, rather than just thinking, oh, well, I haven't got time for a meditation tonight on Headspace, so I'm just not going to do it. And one of the ones that I will talk to anybody and everybody about is some sort of breathing technique. So it could be belly breathing. It could be this, where you breathe in for 4, hold it for 5, and then blow out for 6. That blowing out for longer is really important. And interestingly, I happen to know that that's because of getting rid of the carbon dioxide out of your system. Because actually, when you have a buildup of carbon dioxide, it actually causes confusion, which I only know because it's something that my dad went through. But doing the breathing, when you are in that time of fight or flight. So yes, I used to do meditations in the evening and I would practice my breathing, but do you know what? Actually doing it at the time, or in 10 minutes before the meeting, when you actually maybe take yourself out into some fresh air, do the breathing then, because if you can go into that meeting or a test or an exam in a better situation, a bit more relaxed, then actually you've got a better chance of keeping your anxiety at a lower level. And then I'm hoping I'm going to be able to see the next bit, because I've got this big Teams thing all over my screen. Let's have a look. Here it is. So another thing, and for me, this is what mindfulness is all about. So getting your 5 senses. So basically, there's all sorts of ones. There's like a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So can you pick out right now 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can touch, or whatever? So you actually, and I cannot tell you the difference that that makes, because as soon as you start looking around, what I have also learned recently, and this is why nature is so good for you, is that the little tiny eye movements that you make when you start to look around and you notice something, or you're looking at maybe the flowers or the trees, those little tiny eye movements are really good for your body and actually helps your body to start relaxing. It's really good for depression and anxiety. So I literally learned that a couple of weeks ago. So all of these things, and I'm not a medical doctor and I'm not an expert in these things, but I kind of try to keep all of this knowledge because it's really good for me. But using your senses, looking around, naming things, just completely takes you out of that situation of the anxiety that you're going through. Okay, so expressive writing, not my forte, I'm going to tell you straight away. And I loved the fact that Inez shared that poem with us. And I know Scott meant to share some work with us as well, but he's super busy with his new job. But there's all sorts of ways in which you can do this. And look, I should have put drawing in here as well. But interestingly, I know there's been research about expressive writing reducing maths anxiety. I am going to look for research about art, which I'm sure there must be because of art therapies that happen. And for expressive writing, doesn't tend to work for everybody, but for some people that's going to be really important. It doesn't have to be something that you create, for example, poetry or fiction. It could be journaling and writing down how you feel. And do you know what? It could be 5 minutes before a meeting, you jot down all your feelings. And I'm a big believer in, well, look, I'm leaving them on that piece of paper then. It's like they're out of my head. And I know with my anxiety, it just keeps going round and round in my head. Well, when I get it out and onto the paper, that kind of helps to relieve that a little bit. Okay, so I kind of thought, well, the thing is, I know work is a really important place where you might be coming across numbers, but so is home life, and particularly if you have children. And there is research to show that for children that have grown up in a household where one or both parents are maths anxious, they have already got signs of anxiety by the time they start school. Now, signs of maths anxiety by the time they start school, which I was really surprised about. And whenever I say this, I always say, look, this is not to say, oh my gosh, I should feel really guilty because of the way I talked about number when, my child was little. No, not at all. But isn't it important to know? And, as much as, I mean, gosh, it's like being a teacher for 29 years and absolutely being terrified of spiders. But whenever there's a massive spider in the classroom, I can't sort of scream. So I have to keep calm. And I always remember in one of my first years, Russell, could you just go and rescue that spider from that cupboard, please? But, it's kind of like that, isn't it? And the thing is, there are things we can do. So, okay, games, I know it's kind of an obvious one, but do you know what, actually? Card games even, it doesn't have to be something mathsy, but card games involves adding and subtracting, which might ruin card games for some of you now, I'm sorry. But, it's kind of in a relaxed environment, isn't it? Board games, counting on, adding on, I'm on square 18, I've rolled a 5, let's work out what I'm going to go to next. Shut the Box is a great game, and I use that a lot with my students who are dyscalculic as well, because it's a great game. It could just be about dot pattern recognition. Okay, I've rolled in that little center there. I've got 2 5s, haven't I? So I can put down that 5. Shut the Box is a super easy game, but you can also do a bit of adding and subtracting with it. Lots of little things that are just fun. And of course, for you, it's not like you have to then go into school the next day, so at least there isn't a pressure on you to really start loving maths, but it might be a really positive thing for your children as well. So that's one way. And I put down on the right hand side there about those everyday life skills that we kind of forget are still maths and numbers, measuring out the stuff for baking, for example, actually planning holidays, budgeting for something, but also, oh gosh, we need to be in the car at 10 o'clock. What time do we need to get up in the morning? And all thinking about that sort of planning as well. And all of that is number. And again, I don't want to ruin baking for you. But do you know what? If that's something that you enjoy and you're used to measuring all those things out, maybe it's also a good thing to know that that is something that you're doing to do with maths and number, but because it's also part of a more fun and relaxing hobby, it's something that you don't mind so much. And I just think it's great for our brains to realize, oh, actually, I do that all the time. And I didn't think about it before. So yay me, because I've been doing that. So, sometimes these things, it's important for us to notice actually what we are already doing as well as what's tricky. And this next one for parents is something I found out about sort of more recently, and that was, which I really love, and I actually think that although I would recommend this for children that have got maths anxiety, if you're a parent with maths anxiety, there's something really lovely about it's a book, this particular one, and it comes from the website bedtimemath.org because it's American. But what I really loved about this is that they've got all sorts of things like, oh, how many stars do you reckon are in the sky? How many bees do you reckon it takes to make a jar of honey? And there's kind of like no right or wrong answers. It's all just about chatting about it. I don't know that right before bedtime is the best time because it seems too exciting for me. But there's little videos as well, and I just think it's a really nice way of chatting about maths and how you would work things out, because really in the end That's what maths is about. And I did a course a couple of years ago to help me to teach GCSE math. And that was the one I was talking about when I was really, really maths anxious. And what was really interesting is what I found out. Well, first of all, was that everybody was anxious, however good at maths they were. But what I really found out was that actually people do things in all sorts of different ways, and they didn't have to follow a set pattern, and you don't have to do it a set way. And I know that's not quite right when children come home with homework and they have to do it in a set way, but actually maths can be something really fun to talk about. You can look at patterns in everyday life, you can do things with numbers on number plates, and it all sounds really small, doesn't it? But as a parent, that's great for your children to be taking part in. But actually, yet again, that's you taking part in doing some maths without hopefully it feeling too pressured. So it might seem small, but actually that's really important, is to start small and actually just have a little bit of fun with some things. I mean, weirdly, I really love maths now. And until until about 5 years ago, I would have cried if you'd told me I was going to be a maths teacher. I'm not joking. So I've suddenly found, oh my gosh, if you give me a sandwich date, the 29th of October, 2029, that's going to be a great day because you've got the little pattern in the numbers. And actually, when you let yourself just look at that sort of thing, it can be really fun. It's just that we don't remember that because we remember those things in school, perhaps, that started off our anxiety. So I love this book. I think this is a great way to think about numbers and maths, and a fun way to look at problem solving, I suppose. I sound like such a maths teacher. Okay, and then the final thing for here is really whether for some of you, you may want to challenge your beliefs about yourself and your maths, and whether you can do it or not. And this isn't for everybody, and this may not be for you now, but maybe in the future it would be. But it could be that, like I've been saying sort of all the way through, you might start to think about the things that actually you are already doing to do with maths and number, and actually ticking those things off and going, yeah, do you know what? That's really good. I'm really pleased that I've done that, jotting it down somewhere, because then you can't sort of trick yourself into thinking that you don't do it after all. So, and I've got an idea about how you might want to look at maths a bit more. And as I say, this is not to say that that's what you have to do. It's not to say that that's the point of this presentation either. But that's what I wanted to do, was to give you lots of options that you can choose from, that you hopefully can pick things that might be quite helpful. So let's go back to our toolbox. So we've done 2 of those areas, and the other 2 things are a little bit, you'll be pleased to know, a little bit shorter because we've only got 10 minutes left. So very quick look, because, and this I wanted to bring up, this is about the support that's available, because I figured that, for some of us, we may be anxious even though we can do the maths. But for some of us, we may be understandably anxious because maths is really hard for us. So I have just literally got a couple of quick things to look at that you might not know about. So first of all, and I know if you've seen anything from the Dyscalculia Network, I'm sure you've probably seen something about this. This is fantastic. So this is something that you can actually hand to your work, to your employers, and this is how to design information for people with dyscalculia or low numeracy. Now, you might not have either of those things, but your maths anxiety make you, or almost makes your brain act in a way as if you have low numeracy or dyscalculia. So we're kind of all in the same boat right now once we're anxious about maths. So that's just a way of clarifying numbers, how to write them more clearly. And it kind of goes in, doesn't it, with asking for information beforehand if you're going to have to look at information in a meeting involving numbers. So it's all about how you can make things just that little bit easier within the office environment. But I wanted to look at a couple of ways of accessing formal support, because if you are struggling with those numbers, if actually that's impacting your ability to do your work. There are all sorts of things that you can do or you can apply for that might give you help. So, for example, there's the Access to Work scheme, and there's loads of information on the government website about that. But Access to Work is where you can get a grant that will help to provide you with anything that you think is going to actually help you to work things out. So, for example, it could be if you need to use Excel, it could be training on using Excel, which I would hope would involve you being able to set up the spreadsheets you want so that they're all done. It could literally be a laptop to allow you to access Excel if you don't have access to that in the workplace. It could be human support to do something. So there's all sorts of, particularly with assisted technology, there's all sorts of things that the Access to Work scheme can provide. But if you're not sure what would help, because actually that is the situation half the time, then a workplace needs assessment might be helpful. And in that situation, somebody would either remotely or perhaps with a visit to your office would talk to you and talk to your employer about how we can make things not easier for you, just how that we can make sure that all the work is accessible for you if you're struggling with numbers in some way. So that can be much more personal to you so that you're able to sort of explain what you need. And it would involve your employer as well. So of course that might not work for everybody, but I wanted to flag it up. And I'm going to be shameless now. And for 2 seconds, I'm going to say I can offer workplace needs assessments. But do you know what? You do not have to go with me. I just wanted to flag it up because I personally wouldn't have had a clue where to look before I trained. So little bit about support available. So, there are things out there that I just don't think we know. And in both of those cases with workplace needs assessment and Access to Work, that isn't costing you anything. That is the government providing you things so that you can do your job, because that's what we do, isn't it? And finally, a few tools that some of you will already know, I'm sure, really for those people that are struggling with maths as well. So I wanted to flag up a couple of things really before we finish. And on this first screen, I've just got 3 different types of calculator. I'm a big believer in finding the app that's going to do the job for me, because I know there's one out there. I just need to find it. So I've got 3 here. I finally come across the Dyscalculator app on the left. There's a webinar on the Dyscalculia Network website, which I will flag up in a moment. That's amazing because if you
quickly,
yes,
Amanda,
of course you can.
That's not the same Dyscalculator app. That's an old one, and there's a new one. That one actually, that one does work for some people, but it isn't the new Dyscalculator calculator.
I will say that website is the one that the picture is one that just fitted into that square on the template.
Yeah,
but
it's just
the website is fine. So sorry everybody, it's going to look different. There's a web app and there's an iPhone app. They're developing the Android app, so it won't look like that. However, it is really good for things like working out time intervals, sorting out money, cooking calculators, changing things. But it's the time and the money for me are really, really good on there. So sorry about the picture, but the website is definitely right. In the middle, we've got a specific kitchen calculator, because actually, maybe particularly when you've got other people coming around, that's when your maths anxiety comes up, is trying to get all those things changed, those units converted, or to scale up the recipe. So that's the middle one. And then at the end is basically every single calculator under the sun, which I'm assuming is why they call it calculator soup. And it has got everything. So all sorts of calculators, including things like financial calculators, so working out interest and repayments and so on. It could be like building type calculations in terms of how to measure things, and so that's really good. And although I haven't given you a lot of detail about that, I just wanted to point you in that direction really. This, I hope, on the next screen is the Dyscalculator app, because this is fabulous. Sorry, that picture honestly just fitted. So this is the real life Dyscalculator app, and this is the webinar. There's a link at the bottom there, and you'll be sent this tomorrow, so you can access that. So that is a webinar that they did for the Dyscalculia network, and yeah, well, I'm so glad I finally watched it, because it is amazing. I couldn't stop talking about it to people. Okay, so I just wanted to flag up Monzo. I think Starling are good as well in terms of banking, but if you're finding money difficult to manage, I have been reliably informed that the Monzo banking app, and just Monzo itself, is really good in terms of sort of making your budgeting much clearer. So we're color coding things. Here we're splitting up a bill, which honestly I'm beyond excited about, when you're in a restaurant, because that's another situation, isn't it? Where you don't want to have to do that maths under the pressure of everybody else looking at you. So the Monzo banking app is definitely one worth looking into. And I'm sure you can get some more information chatting to each other about that actually afterwards. And finally, this is the one I mentioned when I said about maybe challenging your beliefs about yourself. That's exactly what the National Numeracy Challenge is all about. And it's about finding where you are in terms of your maths. And if you want, taking you forward and helping you to perhaps overcome that fear by expanding your skills. Now, that is not something you have to do by any stretch of the means. But again, I just wanted to make sure that everything was there for you in case you wanted to look into that. So if I pop back, basically, these are your three places for help. Okay, so that one on the left there, the Mathematics Anxiety Research Group, right at the beginning, I talked about Dr. Tom Hunt, and he is one of the psychologists that have set up this research group. But do you know what's brilliant is the website? There is so much accessible information on there, and all of their interviews and articles are all free to access on there. They really are doing as much as they can to spread the word. Obviously, the Dyscalculia network, who are doing so much for so many adults that struggle with maths, including with maths anxiety. And we've got the Maths Anxiety Trust at the end there. And you might have noticed when I looked at the statistics, both the Maths Anxiety Trust and the Dyscalculia Network had done some work on that. So those are your three places. All of this will be on the presentation tomorrow. And then I'll just leave you with what I think is the final official slide. It's the first time I've used this template. So I kind of hope, I know this hasn't perhaps been like, right, come on, Amanda, find me all the answers. But what I hope is that I've got started enough to give you some ideas, and chatting to each other. I think if you're able to stay on afterwards, well, go to the pub night, I think would be fantastic. So share all that good practice.
Amanda, thank you so much. There's so many good things there. I thought I'd come across every maths book, but I haven't got the bedtime maths one, but it'll be arriving via Amazon shortly.
Oh, it's lovely. And there's little videos on the website, all beautifully illustrated. Honestly, that was just a joy finding that. I mean, poor Alfie, my grandson. Bad luck, mate.
he's gonna have a lot of maths books in his future. There was a question a little while back,
yes.
When you were talking.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see
which
that.
Said, no, it's all right. Grace said, with writing it out, do you write out all the steps? If you're writing like how you're feeling about your anxiety, is that what you meant, Grace? No, sorry. What was it doing? Sorry.
No, that was in response to another comment from someone else who's watching the training as well. Who helpfully answered. So it was just in response to that.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I wasn't sure if there was a particular question. Has anyone got anything they'd like to say while Amanda's still joining us? Other than thank you, Amanda, I'm sure for me, certainly. I'm just going to turn off the recording in case you'd rather say something when it's off. So thank you all for joining. And we hope that if you've watched the webinar on catch up, the recording, if you've got any questions, feel free to pass those into us, send them in. We're happy to pass them on to Amanda. And also do follow us on the Dyscalculia network, and hopefully we'll have more things for adults soon.